I was on mute. Hello, everyone. We're back.
Hello.
Excellent. All right. Let's start. This is actually quite exciting. This is the first of its kind panel discussion about equity work, intersecting music and craft spaces. We are going to bring you experienced equity workers trailblazing in their own fields and making tangible changes to shift the world to a more equitable space for everyone. So allow me to give you a very brief introduction to each panelist, who will then tell us more about themselves when we start. So we'll start with Jimin Morgan Kim. Hello, Jimin. A violin restorer and co-founder of Women in Luthery. She was born in Seoul, Korea, and started her Luthery journey in 2005. Now based in New York City, where after more than a decade of extensive high-end violin restoration experience, she established her own shop. Hello. There we are. And we have our returning panelist, Amanda Ewing, a Nashville-based violin, cello, and bass maker. She began her Luthery journey in January 2018, first recorded African-American violin maker, and she founded Black in Luthery. Hello, Amanda. Then we have Anne Harris. She is a roots and blues fiddle player, songwriter, and recording artist. Welcome back, Anne. Next, we have Maria Jose Pelayes Aguera. Originally hailing from Mexico, Maria Jose now splits her time between Mexico and the US, where she makes and repairs guitars and Latin American folk strings. Hi, Maria. We also have our returning, well, she was moderator yesterday, Katie Thompson. Hi, Katie. Originally from Texas, she's lived in South Carolina for 26 years, where she founded Women of Woodworking and the digital publication Pen and Chisel. Hi, Katie. Next, we have Sarah Marriage from the USA. Sarah is a maker of fine furniture and other wooden objects, and is founder of a workshop of our own, a space where women furniture makers can come together in a supportive environment in Baltimore. Hello, Sarah. Next, we have Hilary Brady Morris. She's from Arkansas and Ireland. Hilary Brady Morris is a Himalayan lute specialist, a novice luthier, and an apprentice musical instrument repair person. Hello, Hilary.
Sorry, Yasmin. Hilary B. Jones. Sorry to interrupt. We have two Hillarys.
Oh, right. Oh, apologies. I apologize about that. Oh, I will get your correct bio, Hilary. Apologize. But while I do that, let me introduce you guys to our moderator, Shawndel Fraser, who is an ecofeminist environmental psychologist specializing in creating safer spaces and reconstructing culture, as well as a ceramicist, dancer, musician, educator, and a podcast host. Shawndel, don't go anywhere. I need to introduce Hilary appropriately, which means, Hilary, you're going to get a very good spotlight. Right. Right, there we are. So Hilary, originally from North Dakota, now lives in Rhode Island. She's a musician, a former girls rock camp director, and a guitar salesperson and professor of gender studies and psychology with a background in sexual violence prevention. Hello, Hilary. My sincere apologies. All right, everyone. Well, enjoy the panel. We're going to have a Q&A at the end, and we might get some questions in the middle as well.
Oh, wait, did Shawndel get introduced?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I was checked out. Okay, take it away.
Excellent. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I'm really excited about this talk. Just a brief addition to my intro to frame my perspective, and then we'll launch into the questions so you understand where I'm going. So I am a lifelong crafter. I have some formal training as well as self-taught in fiber, ceramics. I'm also a musician, a dancer, dance teacher, and environmental psychologist. I think kind of brings it all together. So as an environmental psychologist, I think in terms of solutions that are multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and I look at, the behavior codes and norms in environments and who are the gatekeepers. So who controls access, both exclusion and inclusion. And so it's with that frame that I frame our conversation today, where we talk about our experiences, but also look towards from what we've gained, what we know of history, and of course, what we can glean from anecdote and our own experiences towards those opportunities to facilitate forward movement and more inclusion within the music and craft spaces that we represent. So thank you for those introductions. That's great. I wasn't expecting that, so it's a great treat. So I'd like us to jump in and have each of us just talk about the current equity work that we do, and also any future equity work that you're thinking about launching into, any segues you see coming up for yourself. I'll try to limit our questions so we do have enough time for the Q&A. So if we could all be authentic and succinct, that would be awesome. So whoever feels the energy first to go can feel free.
I'll start. So I'm Jimin, and I had been dreaming about organizing a panel like this in a cross-disciplinary equity work for years. In the equity work, I kind of started getting into it because of Latin dance, which is how I met Shawndel years ago. So I've been doing Afro-Latin dance for about 16 years, pretty seriously, both solo and partner, and group. And specifically in partner dance scenes, I started noticing a lot of problems, and that's kind of just by not because I planned out to, but just because it's what people were telling me about. I started kind of doing survivor support work without realizing that's what I was doing, and then eventually realized, oh, this is way out of my depth, got myself trained, all those things, and started doing more and more community work, and that's how I got into it. And then eventually during the pandemic, last year, when I decided to take a break from that community, I decided, well, I really want to do this work, same thing in my field, because my my own field has a lot of issues that I've personally felt, and also other people have told me. So when I started, and that's how the Women in Lutherie started with Jennifer, when Jennifer and I met, and when we got together, I think just talking about what is equity work and what is this all about? I think there's a lot of questions and confusions among the public and among the people who are doing this. I think there's what I realized is that across the different genres and disciplines of things and fields and industries that we do this work, there are so many similarities that we keep seeing. And I really, really would love to. I'm super excited about today because I respect every single one of you that's on the panel today, and I can't wait to hear all of your experiences and wisdom. And that's how I got started. Next person, please.
I guess I can go next. So I guess I got started with equity work while I was living in Argentina. I've always been just a people person, and I don't have a lot of I guess I'm not very tech savvy, or I don't have very big organization skills on a larger scale, but I've always just known that I really like working with people. I really enjoy talking to people. I'm a good listener. I like listening to people and helping them out. So I started out by volunteering in an organization that's called La Poderosa in Argentina, and it was basically helping communities, settlements, they're called settlements because it's basically people that can't find housing. Instead of choosing to go homeless, they choose to build their own houses and land that they don't own. And these neighborhoods are created that aren't registered by the government, and they don't have lighting or water or any other types of services. So children end up going also to schools that are overcrowded because these communities aren't accounted for. So I started working with that organization and just working with children in general. I really enjoy it, and doing after school work and organizing extra classes if they needed schoolwork. Also creating kind of like knitting communities between women. So we would like give knitting classes and weaving classes, and we would always try to have like a topic like abortion and women's rights, and just sort of like trying to interject all these like talks about, you know, like rights and things that they should be like thinking about for their communities to like get better services and just basically ask for what they deserved from the government. So that was my first experience with equity work, and it was just amazing. And like I said, it's just my passion is talking and relating to people and helping in any way that I can. And then in during the first year of pandemic, with basically all of my uh, girlfriends from college, we started getting together because of a conversation that Flor Centurion and Agustina Alvarez had in Buenos Aires. And we decided to create Luteristica. And basically that ever since then, everything has been just amazing. Like we started creating a network for Spanish speaking luthiers. And for me, it has been life-changing. I know for everybody else that participates in the network has just been, you know, like inspiring. I think we can all relate to like how powerful it is to like find people you can relate to and you can see yourself in and look up to in this type of work. So and basically that's what I'm in charge of in Luteristica, is just connecting and talking to people, and I want people to know about us and for us to get exposure. So that's me.
I'll speak a bit. I never really considered myself doing equity work, but the more that I listen to Jeanine, I'm realizing that perhaps I am in the very beginning stages because of just really identifying why the bridges have kind of either been cut off, not built, between Black and Brown identifying individuals being in the space of Luthery, and why. And doing my best to creating those pathways that allow us to be successful in the industry if we want to be. And why haven't we been in the future? I guess I'm still on that why. What is it? Is it because of the way we look? Is it because of resources? Is it because there's no diversity? So, when we step into the door, you can't do this, not because you don't have the aptitude, not because you don't have the desire, but mentally, I've never seen anyone look like you doing it. Therefore, I'm just going to assume that this is not going to work. So for me, having conversations with individuals and asking those questions like, why can't this person come here and be treated fairly and get the same opportunity as another individual that comes in? And they're very similar. They both don't have experience, but one person is taken by the hand and shown the A, B's, and C's, and the other person is asked to see the door. So that's starting, I suppose, with myself. That's where the equity work started, was a bit with me, and now it has branched off to Mario, an individual that I'm helping to try to be successful in the industry because that's what he desires. And he has had doors shut on him, and he has been turned away, and he has been looked at interestingly or in a way that's uncomfortable for him. And I'm thinking, especially to have a Black man in those spaces and the things that come along with being a Black man in a white man's space and being summed up by how you look is really unfortunate, turns people away, and continues to contribute to the lack of diversity in the field. So
So yeah, I'm learning a lot just by listening to you each other speaking about it. Yeah, I may be doing some equity work, and that feels that feels really good because there's obviously a lot of work to be done. And I'm also trying to highlight the fact that there is room for us also in this space. Yeah, and that it's not like we're not the dinosaur in the room here. We are talented, we are capable, we are able to also be able to do this wonderful thing that other people are doing as well.
Hi, I guess I'll go next. My name is Sarah Marriage. 5 years ago, we opened the doors at a workshop of our own, which is a 6,000 square foot educational wood shop here in Baltimore, Maryland, for women and gender nonconforming folks. I started out in engineering, wanting to be a furniture maker, and have always sort of worked in male-dominated fields, lived in a male-dominated family, and just all brothers. And it wasn't until I was in like a woodworking wood shop environment that I really noticed that. And long story short, decided it would be a good idea to start a space where women and gender nonconforming people could come in and sort of just be woodworkers, even though, like, you know, the space is about gender from the outside. Once you're inside, it's this thing that is so othering about you is no longer othering, because everyone is that thing, or everyone is underrepresented by gender in that room, or in the larger field. I started that. I started working on this in 2015. We opened in 2017, and I'm finally sort of starting to get back into making my own work again. I will say I've sort of been focused deeply on administrative work and teaching, and so as far as future of my equity work, I think just trying to keep WU going. WU is what we call a workshop of our own. And then also working on my own art as well, to kind of stay alive and sustained in and remembering kind of the original drive for the project. We teach, on average, I think we teach about 700 people a year. That went down in the pandemic. I actually went up the first year of the pandemic because of virtual programming, but has gone down as we try to crawl back into a new world post-pandemic. But yeah, we work with a lot of people and hope to continue to have an impact on bringing people into the woodworking crafts who, to be, a huge percentage of people that come into our space never even considered woodworking until they heard that the space existed. So that's, and that wasn't what I was thinking when I started the project. I was like, let's make a space for people who want a space but don't feel comfortable. And what I've learned is that there are people that are just constantly editing themselves out of these spaces because they don't even realize that they're making that decision until they've discovered that there's this option and realize, oh, you know what, I actually might be interested in that. Anyway, so that's what I do, and that is what WU's about.
I can go if that's all right. I'm so excited to be here. What a great group of people. This is amazing. Y'all are great. So my background, jumping off of Sarah, because the work that I did with rock camps, I feel like is very related to that. So I ran our local Girls Rock Camp chapter, now called Riot Rhode Island, for about 10 years. And I stepped down from that position in 2019. And what I found that was interesting in those spaces, because you are like kind of creating this bubble, right? Like in those spaces where it's like people can take risks, they can do things they wouldn't always do, they can you know, express themselves in different ways and like dig into things and ask questions without that fear of judgment, right? And after we'd have a camp, every time, whether it was a child or an adult taken in the camp, the week after they would come in and say, you know, I I can't believe I have to go back out into the world, out of my bubble, right? And so as I was trying to decide what to do when I stepped out of that role in 2019, I was like, well, how can we go about like making let fewer spaces a bubble, right? How can you make other workplaces a bubble? And so the places that I was focusing on, because I'm very interested in music gear, is like mostly in music gear spaces. So that's kind of the work I've been doing, is working with a lot of like pedal builders and manufacturers and retailers to, you know, do trainings in their spaces, work on their policies, work on their all of that work, values development, that kind of thing. So that's kind of the work that I've been doing to try and like figure out how to like expand that a little bit and like kind of put the onus on the folks on the outside instead of the folks on the inside. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at right now. I also run a podcast called Midriff about gender and music gear. So that's what I'm up to. Thank you.
Was that everyone? Did we get Katie?
No, I'm happy to go. Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button. Hi, I'm Katie Thompson. I'm the creator of the Women of Woodworking Project and my digital journal, Pen and Chisel. I started, I guess, my equity work in college, working for the City of Charleston Office of Cultural Affairs. And from there, it's just, that's been my calling. Living in a very, you know, conservative Southern environment, I've always been someone that like questions things, and it's definitely like, you know, bit me in the ass a few times, but at the same time, it's just the way I am. It's just my natural tendency. It's almost kind of like I had to realize that sometimes just asking a question, that small act, can, you know, lead to much bigger things. So I try to take that approach in my work as well. I started woodworking in 2010 when I met my husband, Joseph Thompson. He's a furniture maker and teacher and just all around amazing human, and has been such a great partner and mentor to me, but it still didn't protect me from, you know, the patriarchal system, the typical white male dominated nature of woodworking specifically. And at the time I was building furniture with him, and it was interesting in our panel yesterday, I believe Elizabeth mentioned that, you know, men, they're often expect to have a meal ready for them when they come home. That's kind of the expectation for the working man. And I remember being at, I don't want to say what show it is, but it was a big national show. And a man walked up and said, you know, oh, so you help him, you know, help your husband, you make dinner for him, make sure he has what he needs to keep doing what he wants. And I turn around, like, my name is not on the sign behind me too. And that was when I was like, okay, like I got to start a conversation about this. And taking that small approach, loving conversations. I've always been a writer. I decided to just start interviewing other women in trans and non-binary woodworkers, starting with Sarah Marriage and Leslie Webb. They were the two that really like pushed me to start doing this, and especially Sarah's work with Woo, just I've told her before, like constant inspiration. And it's been all volunteer. It started out as just written interviews and sharing them on my blog. I'm also a disabled woman, so it's brought in a lot of aspects about access, and again, more equity work around welcoming disabled makers to the spaces, and that personal experience has influenced my work. When the pandemic hit, I took the opportunity to finally incorporate some video content and started doing just weekly Instagram lives, and it was incredible to see the response. And it showed me, again, that just a simple act of asking questions, creating space, and validating someone's experience can go so much further than you realize. And I think, like Sarah said, you know, you don't realize there's so many people that didn't see themselves in those spaces before and didn't consider it for themselves. So that was a really wonderful thing to see as well, especially when the pandemic started. There was a lot of makers that were like, all right, I'm going to go for my dream, or this is what I've always wanted to do. So I was very motivated by the community's willingness to take risks, and that inspired me to continue with that as well. Since then, I am on the board of trustees for the Furniture Society. We've created a monthly, now bi-monthly, Women of Woodworking Affinity Group, which is just been a wonderful resource where we host, now we host, speakers with different topics every other month, and people can attend. We've had kind of more general meetings where people can kind of come in and share. We do try to keep it more conversational, casual. But it's been a great resource. And I just also wanted to say like how grateful I am to be here today as a part of this conversation. Like, thank you all so much for having me be a part of this. And I'm just blown away by the talent on this panel as well. So thank you all so much.
Anne, have you anything?
Hi, everybody. I'm Anne, and I'm so blown away by everyone's work that you're doing in the world. So thank you for doing it. It's inspirational to me. I don't really feel qualified. I should be upfront to even speak to this particular subject because I don't work actively, specifically in equity and inclusion. But I work in spaces where I'm the only one that looks like me, so I do it in a way that is kind of, I guess, without the intention in so to speak. I'm a fiddle player, and I work predominantly in the blues and American roots worlds, and I'm pretty much the only one of the only women of color fiddle players in that realm. I've maybe run across one other person in my career actively doing the kind of work that I'm doing in the field that I'm doing it in. And there's a couple of men that are also fiddle players in this realm, but it's very rare. And it's rare in the genre period to have a fiddle in that space. So I work in a space where, and I have been spending my career in a space where I'm kind of the only one that looks like me doing the things that I do. But I will mention that a couple of years ago, there was a couple of dear friends of mine who are artists in the blues field, Black women, that started a group called Sister Girls, and it was just a pandemic place for a few friends in our industry to kind of meet and talk about whatever. And it grew into a list that now, from a handful, is huge. And our reach now is sort of across our American roots genre in this very informal way. And it's very interesting because it's become this resource in a grassroots sense of, does anybody know of a great doctor? Does anyone know of a good natural healing modality for this thing? Does anyone know of a great place to do this or that? And it's this informal community that we kind of built without the intention of building. And so when I kind of question my role in specifically equity and inclusion work, it's basically showing up in the spaces as the only, knowing I'm going to be the only one, quite possibly, and usually the only one like me in that space, and holding a consciousness for other people that are either watching that, and knowing that I'm connected through this invisible network, through these other women. It's kind of an interesting perspective, but I'm just so honored to be here, and I'm so inspired by everyone's story. So thank you for having me.
Wonderful. So now you all see how amazing and powerful you are. I had such a wonderful time. It was an honor and privilege to talk to each of you embodied leaders, right? And being the change that we want to see in the world is not just a truism or like a quote on a magnet. This is lived reality. And you know, these informal networks, as you talk about, all of you kind of started with that, right? There was someone who gave you the encouragement or embodied the thing that you're like, I think I have an idea that's kind of like that. And that is the beginning of what it is that we do here. So, you know, with the pandemic, one of the things I perceive in my particular way is this is our opportunity to undo what industrialization has done to us. And so all of these calls to cottage industries that everybody's having, it's a great opportunity to be able to root ourselves in what work feels human, humane, passionate, and meaningful to the world, rather than earning our money, you know, because we have to do it in a robotic fashion. It's the only thing available to us. So for the next question, you know, we all represent these nice niches of humanity in our fields. And I wanted to take a moment to see if we can identify anyone who may be not in the room, but who is also crucial to the field, and maybe they don't have yet representation in any type of way, in any type of the ways that you guys embody change in the field. For example, I did tune in a little bit in the midst of this crazy week of mine to one of the talks where there's a PhD scholar looking at the Mexican and Mexican American women who were winding, I guess, the pickups for Fender. And, you know, their names are kind of lost to history and what happened to them and how they developed the ability to create unique sounds in these instruments. I don't know this field well enough to go beyond what I've just learned, but do you all have any demographic groups that maybe we should just acknowledge as being a part of this movement, even if they're not here right now?
I think like it's not that they're not present, like for example, in an organizations, but I do think there needs to be like more light shed on transgender individuals just in general. I mean, if we all have like a hard time finding people to relate to it, I know it's a lot harder, I mean, for them. And other than like that demographic group, I think in general, like one of the most important things is like changing the narrative, like making like those women that are maybe working in a shop, or you know, I'm just the assistant, I'm just the wife, like changing that narrative, like helping uplift people and like making them realize like what you're doing is really, really important. Like you deserve to feel like, you know, it's not I think one of the ladies in the panel yesterday for reproductive health said it, like it took me a while to realize, you know, like it wasn't that you know, like I was doing what I was doing, like the childcare that I was doing was allowing my husband to keep working, you know. It's just realizing that what you're doing is just as important, even if you're just like sanding something, or if you're in charge of just gluing the sides or whatever, like that is just as important, and like no work should be minimized.
Yeah, I think I can only speak for mostly my field, which is the violin family industry and field. But I have just over the course of last like 10 years, so I've been doing equity work pretty seriously. I've done a lot of research, and it seems just pretty much everywhere that there is so much invisible labor that happens that are not acknowledged. And then like I was saying, I think earlier somebody in the chat was like, oh, Jimin is luring everyone into equity work. And then I'm like, yeah, but also you guys are already doing it. Like most people I know, especially women, tend to do this because we're all mostly conditioned as women, as we grow up, to take care of other people first and be mindful of what other people are feeling. And if other people are hurt, we need to be there and take care of them. Like it's just so ingrained in our brains that I see people doing it all the time. I see people checking in with each other all the time. And that's how I got started, because I just started doing that. And after a while, I was like, oh, like this is actually labor. Like this is actually so much, it requires not just emotional and not just emotional and mental, but also it does take physical exhaustion to be doing this for other people in everyday life. And I think most people I know, most women I know, are already doing it. And I think that's why the whole making women's labor invisible it's just part of the culture, and we don't think of it as a labor. We don't think of it as like, well, you worked for this many hours today, so you will get paid for this much. We don't think that way. And I know I didn't think that way, because that's also part of the conditioning I got. And we're all part of this culture that we all live in that minimizes and discredits all these type of work. So to answer the question I get is like, everyone, like give yourself a pat on the back if you checked in with your friend or somebody who you know, that like, if you thought, oh, were you having a hard time, just checking in. How are you doing? What can be done to make it better? What can I do? Can I bring soup? Like, that's labor.
So I love that. So to bring it again to us, you all are ahead of the game and having what, is from history, pre-industrial history, referred to as cottage industries. You're solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, and you are doing these things that have, you get to shape it organically according to availability of materials or the ability of your body. But, with capitalism in its current form, invisible labor is crucial to the concept of profit. Right. And so minimizing the value of the most crucial efforts is how we come to value, like have at the bottom of our sheets, oh, we won this year. Right. And so, equity work is social work. Right. And I see social work as the mothers of society trying on their own backs and with their emotional labor to counteract the effects of a patriarchal system. It's like we're all in one big 1950s sitcom as a culture. So absolutely patting yourselves on the back for what you're doing is super important, and also doing it for each other, because that is an infusion of energy that we do need to keep going and to, be able to reinvigorate our bodies. So talking about making the invisible visible, I'm curious about how each of you have cultivated, interest, labor, financial support, and other types of support for your equity work.
I'll start. I always say that Instagram is my boo thing because I remember once Iyanla Vanzant, I don't know if you all know who Iyanla Vanzant is, but she does a lot of work in everybody's community. I think she's now very, very popular in the Black and brown community as well as the white community. But she does a lot of equity work. She does a lot of different types of work, spiritual work. And she talked about it in the sense of being lazy, but she also is like in her 70s. And so she said, I just want to reach the most people by sitting right here in my seat. She said, I'm old, I can't travel, I can't do this, and I can't do that. And around that time, I really wasn't using social like that. But I also have to think that I'm a mother. I have responsibility at home. I have 3 kids. And as much as I would like to go out and take these invitations and travel and speak, I'm not able to do that. And so what I'm very thankful for is Instagram. And so a lot of people are always asking, how can we help? How can we do this? How can we do that? Well, people knowing what's going on is how you can help, because people may want to support you, but they don't know either how, or they don't even know that you're doing this type of work. And so I am thankful to be able to use that platform to kind of highlight and talk about and reach individuals that I may never be in their spaces, but everybody's on, taking the Instagram drug, right? And so I am grateful to be able to showcase the work that I'm doing, to showcase kind of the community that I'm trying to impact via Instagram. And through that, people have contacted me because there's a lot of fear going out there. Like, you don't know, you're walking in with your heart on your sleeve, you're super duper vulnerable. You want to tell people about what you got going on. You want to bring the color of the skin race into the issue, and then that's like a full stop for some people. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear blackity black. They don't want to hear about trans. They don't want to hear about women. They don't want to hear about none of these things. And so using social media is kind of a veil that's kind of helped build confidence to say, yeah. And G-Mean helped me as well, because we were throwing around this, woman of color thing. And she was like, "You're Black, Amanda." And I was like, you know what? I think I was adopting that, because there's cultures of colors that are completely different. And so when we lump them all in the same bucket, things get continually lost, and we're trying to bring things we're trying to salt them individually, as I say. We're trying to bring the individual flavors out, and honor and respect those. And so it's really beautiful how being a part of things like this, each one teach one, talking to one individual, that one individual taking it to the next, that one individual mentioning it in a panel, that one individual, and expanding not only the thought process, but expanding the reach of everyone who knows what's going on, and give them an opportunity to support you in whatever way that feels good for them, right? Whatever way that feels good for them, and it all makes a difference. It's all building. And Shawndel, you can reel me back in and ask the question again, just to make sure I'm staying on track, because I do that a lot, as you know. But it's really good to be able to use those mediums to let people know what you're doing. And I will honestly say, sometimes I don't have all the answers. Like, I don't even know how to be supported at all. And sometimes some people say, "I'm coming to you because I saw this happen and I want to help you in this way. Is that meaningful for you?" And I'll say, like, yes, that is meaningful for me. I actually didn't even think about that. But I'm grateful someone told you about me. Someone told you about the work that I'm trying to do. And then you offered something that would be able to support that. Did I answer the question, Shawndel? Help me out.
It does. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think sometimes with there's certain industries that are not geared towards profit in a way of like, gaining at the expense of the experience or the quality of what's produced, where we don't necessarily think of social media as a helpful tool and extension of our work, a necessary part of our labor to reach our audiences beyond what we organically know. And so, yeah, you answered the question.
I want to butt in and ask Sarah a question. And I think this ties into what Virginia was just saying in the chat. I just want to read this because I think this is something that has been sitting on my mind for the last 10 years, is the social work is usually meant to be volunteering. I wonder if that's part of the issue of making it invisible. So I think that's what I've been trying to grapple with in the last 10 years, that I've been just doing it voluntarily, just automatically doing it. And then it started taking over just my life. And it just felt like at a certain time, I felt like I had 2 full-time jobs, like my day job to try to pay my bills, and then this whole another thing that was consuming almost every day of my life, dealing with the equity work that I've been trying to do. And I felt like it was always just, and I also, people that I was, communities and individuals and people, usually, for-profit, private individuals, I tried to work with, it was always very much the way that they approached me, or they dealt with me, was always like, "Oh, isn't that so nice? You're doing this nice thing." And I just felt like I wasn't being taken seriously. That, and also the separate thing is trying to find funding for this, trying to pay myself, because it's the quite big question that I think this space often always has, is like with women and marginalized groups, we're trying to create the equitable distribution of resources and make sure that we're paid for our labor. But then also by doing that, we're not paying ourselves for our labor. So I really have been grappling with this. And I know when I haven't really met you, Sarah, but I've known about your work for years, and I just was like, wow, she's found ways to get funding and start this and this, and I really want to hear about like what that process was like.
So, it's not as great as it may appear from the outside. We are a workshop of our own has existed, as I said, for 5 years. We still do not have any paid administrative staff. Everything is volunteer run. This year, so in 2020, we were approaching, I really thought we were ramping up to perhaps have some admin staff, and then, March 2020 hit, and we had a huge reset. And then just this year, again, we thought we were maybe going to be able to hire administrative staff, and I mean, we genuinely thought it, and in a very sad way, we have not been able to. And we pay our teachers. That's like very important to us. And we exist and support people who are trying to become makers and do this for a living, and that's very important. But we really struggle with the side of of the organizers, supporting the organizers, and I would love to hear from other people about how they've maybe worked at this. I have a day job. I work for Woodcraft Magazine. I'm an editor there. And to speak to the earlier question, I do hope to, or I am working to bring equity work into that woodworking publishing industry. But yeah, so for funding the project, the initial funding was actually an artist grant, the John D. Minnick Furniture Fellowship. So for my furniture work, and then plus this idea of a wood shop. And then we've done a lot of crowdfunding and a lot of small donations adding up to large support. We've gotten we've been supported by the William Bingham Foundation, which was it's a private foundation grant that one of our volunteers was aware of, and we were invited to apply for. So I find one thing that's interesting about this organizing work is that, like, finding the time to work to support the people in your organization, your teachers, your students, while also working to find funding. All of that is just so tremendously difficult to balance. And then also, working day jobs and, having like a social life and a human life in addition to this. I mean, I eat, drink, sleep, think, woo. But in some ways, I think when you get into that trap, you do a disservice to the organizing work because you're not getting perspective.
Burning out.
Yeah, burning out.
Yeah.
And not even realizing it necessarily. So yeah, there's funding out there. There's not a lot. There's a lot of, like, when you're working with trying to focus on supporting particular communities, also you're like, people from the outside, often men, will look and say like, oh, it's so easy to fund such a niche idea, like niche for more than 50% of the population, whatever. But actually, like, a lot of grants, especially government grants, you have to, they have language in there where you have to provide services to everyone, or so what am I trying to say there? So it's interesting, like where you might think there might be benefits to supporting women as a women and gender nonconforming people or trans people, that there might be like, oh, specific funding for this. It's like, yeah, but like a whole lot of general funding you get excluded from. So it gets complicated.
Can I add something to what Sarah said, that it might be really obvious, but I think it's something important to say, is that all of this like work that everyone does here, and specifically the one that Sarah was talking about, is work, especially like this caretaker and equity work, is work that mostly falls upon women, and it's the work that society and especially capitalism thinks is not worthy of pay or of, you know, like recognition. And these past 6 months that I've been in the US, I've also been lending my translation services to this organization that basically pays caretakers. If you have a disabled child, or even if one of your family members is sick, they'll pay you because you can't have a full-time job due to that. I have not yet interpreted for one man so far. It is literally all of this work and all of this load of everything we're talking about falls on women. So just that.
Exactly. Invisible labor is usually women and whoever is the designated minority group in whatever place that might be. So yeah, go ahead, Gina.
Oh, I just was going to add to that. Yeah, I think the fem labor is a really, really important topic that doesn't get talked enough. Is that it's not even has to do with gender. It's that anything that has to do with the quote unquote soft skills, or people who are more feminine or femme leaning or femme identifying doing the work. It's always in our culture globally always discounted as a femme labor, and I think that's the main thing that I see a lot, is that it's just like discounted. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is definitely, it's an old issue that forms the foundations of Western society, right? The question of rationality versus emotionality, and definitely taking the emotional piece to be less valuable, you know, more attributable to those who have certain bodies and certain roles, and the rational being the thing that is more valued because it's emotion free. But that has led to, you know, a lot of the violences that we experience as microaggressions and actual physical violence. Those of you who do like work around, you know, survivors of sexual assault, that inability for at least half of the population to not fully be in their feelings and to seek closeness in ways that are destructive because they can't simply ask for their needs to be met. So, you know, Jimin, I'm glad you brought this up, because one of the questions I did have for you guys is, you know, thinking forward with what is available now in terms of, say, business structures. Are there ways of doing, and this is you guys hypothesizing, you know, it doesn't have to be like, you know, the exact answer, but is there another way to structure the equity projects that we all have or want to implement that would allow remuneration, that would allow us to be paid in some way? So in addition to like the GoFundMe that Anne and Amanda did, which was, you know, the power of the people embodied, right? And I've also received that type of support when I was in need and had to caretake my dying parents. You know, are there additional things like S-Corps, social enterprises? Like what are some unique ways we can think forward about how we can bring money in to serve the community and be paid fairly, if anything? Maybe it doesn't exist yet, I don't know. Any fortune tellers in the room?
Can I put you on the spot, Hillary?
Oh boy. All right.
I know you do this for a living.
Yes. And that's complicated for a bajillion other reasons, right? Like as like a cis white woman doing this work and getting paid for it, like when, you know, a lot of this work is, you know, I shouldn't be the one doing this work in many cases. Like, and I think that, you know, having worked in nonprofits for 10 years or longer than that, 15 years, really, even that, like, there's so many issues with like the nonprofit industrial complex. So once you get that grant, where's that money coming from? Who are you accountable to? If you're getting individual donations, like who's, you know, who are you accountable to there? So Sarah, like getting all those little donations is great, but also like, I feel like every time I talk to a board, they're like, where's the rich person? And you're like, yes, but you know, that's not necessarily the answer. So it's complicated in all of those different ways, right?
Oh my gosh, I feel that so much.
Yeah.
I also had some experience in nonprofit sectors, and that led me to have a lot of conversation with Jennifer, my co-founder for Women in Luthery, to make sure that we don't become a nonprofit for as long as we possibly can. Because once you start getting funding, you are now beholden to a lot of people wanting to do a lot of control and power dynamic.
100%. And then you get into the thing where it's like, well, we'll give you this grant to do this new project. And it's a brand new program, and we'll pay for the project, we'll pay for the program, but we're not going to pay for any overhead. We're not actually going to pay for any admin. We're not going to pay for, you know, office, you know, whatever that. So it's like, anyway, it can keep going. But anyway, I'm doing consulting work. That's what I'm doing, to answer your question. And so I'm working specifically with companies in the industry to do this, to do trainings and things like that. And the way that I look at it, it's more of a scaffolding. Like I'm the first round of defense. Once, you know, everybody is up to speed, I will pass the baton on to somebody else who should be doing this work. So, but that's what I'm doing. So, and I know that I'm in a very privileged position to be able to do that work as well. So, does that answer your question?
I think so.
That's awesome. I wish I could hire you, Hillary, to come fix all of the workplaces I've been in.
Well, I mean, also like I'm, you know, trying to partner and do this work in different ways so that other people, you know, like creating systems so that like, you know, people can get access to the support where they need it. And then also like I give a percentage of the income that I get to organizations as well. And so like trying to figure out a way to do that, which is not perfect and not the best answer. And perhaps an S Corp or, you know, a social enterprise setup would be a better system. And I don't know enough about that to speak to it, but, you know, it seems like a way to kind of like get a little bit of both ends of the spectrum.
I love that idea. I think a lot of the questions were the walls that we're kind of constantly hitting up against is that with the lack of funding for our labor, and like it's like our individual labor, but also so many people in our community who is helping us to continue this, is that like the system itself, like how do we create a system where it is generating income that done by people who are actually I don't know, like participating in it, like really, this is like a really small thing. I don't know, maybe it's a big thing, I don't know. So we were talking about women of woodworking and how you have all these merch, Katie, and people get so excited about it, like, yeah, I want to get a mug that says women of woodworking. I want to, you know, the hat that says like I'm a woman of woodworking. That's right there. And that is generating, even though it may be small, but it is generating income. Yes. So we were also talking about that in Women in Luthery, like, hey, like, let's get some merch and start.
Can I add one bit to that?
Yes.
Not the merch bit, but I was thinking, I mean, maybe it's that you all put together like a organization that does, you know, consulting, that there's a group of folks that get together that are able to provide that to other people. And so you have a whole co-op or something like that model that's able to do that. And that would be one way to think about it.
I will just add that one of the common messages we get from the community lately, or in the last couple of years, is people reaching out saying, like, we want to start a WU in our community. Not branded WU, but like, we want to start something like your project in our community. And we haven't really had the capacity to help with that. And it's sad, right? It's like, it's a really frustrating and like, it's a sort of thing that eats away at you, like, oh, I should really be able to do that and help these people. And there's all this internal thoughts of like, oh, but I don't really know, I'm just like winging it here. So how do I advise someone else on doing this? And then on top of it, just being like, I simply don't have time, or our organization doesn't have time. While at the same time knowing, like, this is fundamental to the mission of what we're doing, is to help other people do this too. And so I think, yeah, some sort of like higher level organizing, where we can connect groups of people that are doing these same things, and have conversations of, like, bring in the folks from Fireweed Woodshop. And also, like, WU has a large social media presence and is known internationally, and that's amazing, and we're so excited about that. But we also know that there are people there are women who have been teaching women woodworking forever, like since woodworking has existed, and there are people doing this in their garages, in just all over the world right now, and WU is known for it. But it would be so cool to connect everyone that wants to do this and everyone who's currently doing this in some way that supports our work and makes it easier, instead of feeling like it's draining, with the effect of, like, I'm just trying to sort of bounce off this idea of the consulting group, of like, to then figure out how to be more efficient about getting funding, more efficient about paying ourselves, and that sort of thing.
I just want to like add to that, maybe adding or jumping off of what Sarah was saying with the Girls Rock Camp, and that just like immediately reminded me of Mamie Minch's ukulele making camp for girls. And so this might be, I don't want to segue into like what we might talk about later on, but I think the whole like next generation, I think it's because it's like an education thing, and people are, and I had over the course of pandemic, I had to pivot my own personal business to include, I had mostly pro musician client base, and because they all lost their jobs in the beginning of the pandemic, I had lost my income, and I had to pivot and start working more towards rental instruments. And because parents, even during pandemic, were willing to pay money to educate their children. And I that's what I've been doing. And I kind of saw with what Mamie is doing, is that getting into that, like the intersection of the craft spaces, empowering women and girls, and also education, so that some parents are willing to pay to get the girls come get an experience. And even if it may not be a professional thing, I think just empowering girls to be like, yes, you can hold a hammer and do some woodworking and fix these things, and this is like what girls do. It was super exciting to see that. And Maria Jose was a guest instructor this year. So I if you want to add on to that, please. Feel free.
Well, yeah, that was actually like an amazing experience in every way. I mean, getting to meet, I mean, Mamie for me was like super. I mean, she's like an example of what being like a luthier and a businesswoman and just a bunch of things that are really cool. And also, I mean, getting to work with like kids in lutherie, that for me was like something that kind of like I never thought I would do because I love working with kids and I love doing lutherie, but I had like my brain had never connected those two things together. And it actually kind of like opened up my vision to like doing something like that similar, maybe
Me
with
too.
and like kids in Mexico. Like that is something that now I actually really would love to um, try to do, and like maybe try to get government funding or see how I could make it accessible to kids that have parents that can pay and kids that have parents that can't pay. Like that, those two would be awesome. And I guess to like add on to like everything else that we were talking about, I would just mention that also Luteristica is a nonprofit. The only thing that we have is like a suggested yearly donation that we usually use to like cover like the website fee, and if we need to like pay a designer or somebody to edit a video for us, we use that money. But what I do think is that just by the fact of like creating that network, it has all given us like a lift. Like at least for me, like my economy, well, a lot of things changed drastically. Like my economy became lutherie based after participating in the fellowship, because I was having a bit of like a harder time keeping up, only doing lutherie work. And by, joining this organization and getting to meet a lot of other women, I got more job opportunities. And I think it's the same thing for Luteristica, just being connected. Maybe I know somebody contacts me that needs a repair in Argentina, but I'm not there right now, or somebody's looking for a guitar. So like now having this community, we can right away like outsource, these jobs and help each other out to like have more work or sell instruments, just by being connected. Like that has been awesome. I mean, even Jimin, she's getting a guitar from one of our members, Camiluna. So, woo!
Yes. Yes, can I ask you a follow-up question, Majo? So when you say your Luteristica is nonprofit, do you mean are you accredited like a nonprofit organization, or do you just mean that you're all just volunteer run?
Yeah, we are all just volunteer run. Like
So
we really get paid for all the work that we do.
We're so women in lutherie are very basically at the same thing, and I make it a really like we try to make it a very clear thing, because everyone tends to assume like, oh, what a great organization, I mean, but I think I keep trying to be like, no, we're a community of women, we're a grassroots organization, and that's I think hard part is like creating that awareness, but also thinking ahead about like when do you get big enough and that you can make that jump off point to a full-fledged funded nonprofit organization. Like I'm thinking about it. I think the experience of being a grassroots organization or grassroots community work has been eye-opening for me in the last 10 years. I've worked at several of them in the last 10 years, and most of them have disbanded because, like I think Sarah was talking about earlier, we get really burnt out because we're all so passionate about it, and we get burnt out. And then there's a lot of because everyone feels so passionate about it, there's a lot of disagreements and arguments that happen. And it just because it's a human space, that's part of human life and experience, is the arguments and disagreements. And a lot of my friends and colleagues that I started doing equity work with, or had started getting trained from when I started 10 years ago, most of them are not doing it anymore. And or either they're just they're not doing it anymore, and they also left the field oftentimes, because it becomes it's no longer fun. It makes everything just really difficult. So I just wanted to like that. Yeah, that was, I think creating joy is really, really important. And following that and creating like the community, because it's okay if like someone disagree with me, and if we end up creating a different community, like I think that's totally okay. Like the more community there is, I think the more like we can all like more choices people have to choose whatever they feel comfortable in.
Yeah. Oh, to follow up a little bit on what you're saying, like one of the like things that we've talked about in Luteristica, like why we haven't like really taken any steps towards becoming something more official, it's also that we're all in different countries. So then like we've thought about like, well, if we register in Argentina, and then if we do this, if we do that, you know, like since we're all over the place, it's hard. And then also, like you say, it's so much work, and then we all have opinions. So when it's like no longer like fun and you're not getting paid for it, sometimes it's like, ugh. And I must say, I feel like that is one of like my strong suits. Like I will toot my horn a little bit, like in all the aptitude tests that I have like taken, like I am a people person. So I believe that we are all like a team. Like I do not have any of like the tech savvy skills that like Michelle has, and Flor Centurion has, and Dalila that keeps up basically all our posts. But I'm really good at just bringing people together and talking to them. And I think that's where like we become like a team. I think all of this can't be done, you know, like sometimes you want something so bad, you try to do it, you know, all on your own. And it's like, it's really important to remember that like I don't have all these skills. Like this person is really good at like bringing people together and talking to people and just like uniting communities. That is like my main interest. Like, hey guys, let's all come together. And if it can't happen, then it, you know, it can't happen. But it's really important to recognize that we need everybody with different, you know, skills. Like what, you know, like we are an organism, and if like somebody's not there to do, you know, something, it's kind of like if I had to do all the tech stuff for anything, none of it would happen, you know. I would just be sitting there like, oh, how nice it would be to talk to everyone, but I don't know how to like send out Zoom links.
So I'd like to pull together what you all have shared. So with you guys, well, we'll start with Sarah talking about, like, say there's an opportunity to, in some ways, workshop out the shape of woo, but not having capacity to do so. And then you all talking about burnout, you know, carrying this work really mostly internally, doing that internal labor or not, right? All energy needs to be moved. So if it's not being moved effectively, it is going to be draining. And, you know, and I think Hillary mentioned passing the baton, right? Like there are other people who could also be doing the work. And when that moment comes, she would be happy to do that in some way. And so, you know, one of the things that's coming up for me are what are some of the ways just in the regular make a dollar sharing what I know world, you know, if one can extrapolate, these were the steps I took to establish this organization. These are steps one can take. One could make an online course and put it on Udemy and have passive income for $35 per person for however often. And there's something you can point people to. It's not something you have to keep doing. And one could offer a larger event that people pay into. So like I worked in arts admin for quite some time at the Brooklyn Museum, the Studio Museum in Harlem. And so there were different ways that we went about gaining the knowledge that we needed to, like when the internet was new and email marketing was a new thing back in the Stone Ages, you know, how did we access that information for a very good price? And so the equivalent of what I'm sharing is kind of what we were doing back then. But also I wanted to ask about the role of community in you guys' organizations, and maybe Anne can talk about telling the story, because that was something that was very poignant about their success, her and Amanda. But with community, are there redundant skills in your community, right? Everyone has a passion that they want to contribute to the equity work, but is there enough redundancy so that you have someone who could talk to these groups about how the thing was formed and blah, 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 whatever is the interest, and the person who does the other type of labor, admin or people greeting, fundraising, can still do that because there's another representative? Like, is there the opportunity in the work to also pass it on to others, so you have doppelgangers who can do some similar things and free you up for other opportunities and creating other resources? And so, Anne, I do invite you to speak about telling the story, and then I guess you all thinking about the role of community and redundancy. I'd be welcome. I would love to hear any thoughts.
I think I would just offer that community really comes from within, and we don't always acknowledge, because so much of our work is invisible, the power of the scope of our reach. Sometimes people just seeing somebody that looks like them and they've never seen that before is a powerful tool of transformation. So I think because I'm a performer, the work that I do is visibility work. It's showing up to the spaces and using my public platform with intention and with consciousness. And some of that is specifically things I will speak to, or introducing a piece of music that was written by a Black woman composer that no one's aware of, or my own composition, or just introducing the instrument to an audience of younger kids that are probably not having this opportunity to play the instrument. But the power of that, of our own personal networks it's pretty huge, and it's something that I definitely learned through my relationship in crowdfunding with Amanda. I had never done any crowdfunding. I'm a hustler, so I'm a gig worker. I book shows, I play shows. People call me to do compositional work, and I do that, and I'm like constantly on the hustle. But part of what makes my hustle work is being a visible presence, and it ended up being a very important part of how Amanda and I were able to fundraise to make our collaboration possible. So I think I work on the very much the micro level, just through my own networking and with the intention and with the consciousness that you do really never know quite the scope of your reach. It's often quite more powerful than you realize. And that when the whole purpose is those connections, and those connections are what defines community. And as we're moving out of the unsustainable paradigm of patriarchy and capitalism as it's currently defined, the most powerful thing we can all do individually is honor the work that we're doing, and honor the other people in our realm that are doing work that we are able to support in whatever the way that means. And sometimes that's trading and bartering energy, and sometimes it's exchanging ideas, which is one of the most important currencies I think available to us. Conversations like this the spreading out of knowledge, the just visibility of who everyone in this room and everyone on this in this conversation listening wherever they are in the world, you're all drawn to this because we're all people doing kind of invisible work, but it's probably more visible than you could imagine. And maybe you're providing an instrument to somebody that is a visual person that's going to take that mouthpiece and spread it out, which is kind of the work that I do. So I don't know if that answered just what you were speaking to specifically in terms of raising money, or did I get it what you were asking?
Yeah, definitely you touched a piece of it. And there was a story from Amanda where she, talked about the initial fundraising for her trip, and then you all with the commission. So what I had initially thought of in asking you to speak, Anne, was you talked about the power of telling a story of what you all were trying to accomplish with this combination, right? And so if we think of having the first recorded Black woman luthier creating a custom piece, your first custom instrument, right after retiring your childhood instrument, which has carried you so far. And, in this tradition, someone making an instrument that matches what you're trying to reach in your career. And she is one of a kind. You two have racial identity in common. You're both rare in your field. That story that people believed in meant that they overgave, right? They believed in it so much, as like, to heck with the limit, what they were asking for. I'm going to keep giving, let them go further. And so I think the power of the story is what I wanted to offer, because speaking to each of you, your stories are powerful, right? How you came to be where you were, the synchronicity that allowed you to come into being. And then it's like, if those stories carried further, I mean, half the population is women, and then you have the additional them identifying that adds to our numbers, where, I mean, if strength is in numbers, then maybe we all need to craft better stories, myself included, right? You guys only know 1/10 of all the things that I do. So I think I wanted to speak to the very wonderful weaving that you all did of a tale that helped people buy into it.
Yeah, I'll just say a little bit more to that, and then let Amanda speak to it. Again, I really, what moved me to even put this out into a public platform, it's like I felt the importance of the story, and I felt the gravitas of Amanda's presence in this scene, in this world, in this space. And I just felt that I wanted her work and her presence to be elevated to the best of my ability. So I just sort of like vomited out to my small circle. This is a beautiful person. We've got a story that's never been expressed in this sort of way publicly, and we believe in it. And it seemed to really take a life of its own, because I think people, it's really about awareness. It's why when, they show the little stray dog on the end of the news program that needs a home, 1 million people want to adopt the dog. And then there's shelters with millions more dogs that are going to be euthanized because people don't know. I think when people know, when people are moved, they want to know, they want to be of service to the evolutionary process, to the process of expansion, to the process of inclusion. I think more people want that than don't want that, but it's just not the narrative that's being fed in a bigger way. And so it really did and continues to take a life of its own. And as more people know, then more people know. Amanda, what are your feelings about specifically how this is growing for us?
Yeah, when you first talked about the GoFundMe, my heart was saying yes, but my head was saying like, no one's gonna like us. No one's gonna, because when you put it out there in the forefront like that, people get uncomfortable. Yeah. And so it makes them take a deep dive within themselves, and things come up that they've probably never dealt with before. Now it's right here. And especially if you're talking to them in front of their faces and you're talking about, Black women and brown women, and this has never been done. And historically we have been off the records, and then and then they gaze over and they're going back in and thinking about how they've contributed to that machine. And, but during the pandemic, a woman came to me. She's a professor at Vanderbilt University in literature, and she talked about writing a children's book about my story. She was listening. She heard about it from something else, and it moved her heart. And we've been having this long conversation that expanded over the years anyway, but I told her how I wanted to be involved in it. And she gave me this book, and it's entitled Unless It Moves the Human Heart. And so I read it from cover to cover, and I was just thinking, it just underscored the power of the story. And the power of the story is, even though our stories are different, our emotions are similar. So people can see their experience in our story because we have had a similar emotional reaction towards it. So it is very powerful. It's probably why it takes me 17 years to write one social media post, because I have that, look, Amanda, don't just put your picture on here, continue to talk about your story, because your story has gotten you to where you are. Your story has resonated with another person's history. I was yesterday at this arts festival, and I was displaying the process of the violin making from the stump to the actual instrument. And these people were coming over, and they were older women too. And that was so interesting about it, that I really didn't realize what I was stepping into. I didn't realize the history I was stepping into. So I didn't realize that I had some of the freedom riders to my left, and I didn't realize that we were standing on these historical grounds of a Black sculptor here in Nashville. I just didn't realize all these things. And when they started opening them, my mouth was open and their mouth was open. We were sharing these stories, and they were relatable because this woman was trying to enter into a space where they didn't want her to sit. And so when I was telling her about a little bit about my story, and hesitant about sharing it, right? Because, I'm the first female Black on record, it just sounds weird even coming out of the mouth. The delivery has to be right, but she understood it. She understood being one of few or the first, or trying to be here and not wanting and trying to be there. So our stories merged because our emotions merged. And it is really very important to share. And I was concerned about oversharing, and this woman was eating her food, but she was like, tell me, I want to know who you are. And because of her age, she didn't have a phone, so she busted out this notepad and she was writing things down, and I've got to share your name with someone. And it does matter, and we feel that internal urging, and that's really my guidance system, to be able to share, and we don't have to scream it from a microphone. Sometimes it really is one person who may know one person, who may know person, who may know this other person, that create this chain of information that reaches out to individuals who can support you in a certain way that you're needing it. So it is very important. And this one woman, she came up to me because we had like a drive-by conversation, and she said, what are you doing over there? And I said, oh, I'm showing this progression from start to finish. And she said, but what does that mean? And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a really good question. And she said, what else do you do? And why are you doing that? And I told her, because often sometimes people bypass you and they don't really want to know. And I know we can feel that. But she really wanted to know. And I told her it's really about planting the seeds, right? I can only really plant the seeds of interest. I can show up and I can have my face seen from these individuals who may not have seen a woman, a Black woman, working with these type of tools, working with wood before, and giving them the opportunity to consider. That's the thing, giving them the opportunity to consider it. Maybe 20 years from now, I may not even be around to see it, but they may reach a juncture in their lives through your story that has sat with them and starts blooming in their later years, and they think, I want to be a part of this. I want to do this, or I want to do something that's totally different that someone like me doesn't traditionally do. And 20 years ago, I saw this woman doing it, and today I'm getting the opportunity to do the same thing, and I want to do it. So yeah, there is power in the story. It is power from telling it from your perspective, from your history, from the way you've received it and perceived it, and offering that genuineness and offering that openness and offering that vulnerability to someone else. Because it's likely going to resonate with someone else and move them into the next step, whatever that is, that supports you, that supports them, that supports somebody else who crosses their path and is doing the same thing. So I'm so grateful that Anne presented it in a way, because she had this idea and we were talking about it and her voice pitch was really high, which means she was super excited. And so I didn't know how it was going to turn out. And when I actually saw it, I was like, tears, I just couldn't believe how beautiful it was. I wasn't expecting it to be so thorough. I don't think I heard Anne's story about her being such a little wee lad and her first introduction to the music and the instrument. And I just thought, wow, people can really relate to this. And the donations speak for themselves. The donations speak to the hearts that it touched, to individuals who saw it. And then just the support from GoFundMe organization. My mouth was open and I was thinking, wow, there is power in telling our story. And the more we tell our story, the more we remember about it too. That's what I'm remembering. So I'm remembering some of the things that I did not say 2 years ago when I was telling my story. I'm remembering how I felt. I'm remembering how some people responded towards me. I'm remembering things that were super positive, things that were super negative. And when we are signed up for this comprehensive version of life, we're going to experience all those things, and other people experience them too. So it's important to say, yeah, historically, there hasn't been a lot of record on Black and brown individuals, but now we're going to change that. And now we're going to document it and detail it in the greatest detail that we can, so that it stays in history and other people can look back at two individuals doing something that hasn't been done and gain hope and gain inspiration to perhaps do that for themselves.
I want to add to that in the context of the racial issues in the field, in craft field, craft and music field. I think I know Amanda and I talked about this. It's like, well, like so much of the world's infrastructure had been built by the labor of Black, brown, and yellow people. And yet, where are all these people? Like, where are all these crafters in the spaces, like the mainstream spaces? And I gotta give a shout out to my people, because I come from, I was born and raised in Korea. English is not my first language, and I had always felt that as Asian people who we were colonized and were basically westernized really without choice. I wear Western clothes. I sometimes use Western name because most people don't really know how to pronounce my name, so they just kind of like freeze up. So for the ease of getting a cup of coffee at Starbucks, I have an English name. And so walking through these spaces, especially where it's considered, not only it's considered, but the culture itself is so white male dominated, and the people who are the people that are gatekeepers and the people who have the money and power and control are mostly white male spaces. I always felt, and then we hear about this all the time, about like in the classical music field, some of y'all probably had heard about the Asian invasion, where there are a lot of Asian descent players in the classical music field now, and it's called Asian invasion. Oh, the Asians are taking over. And because it's not like, if I have so many of the Asian people change their name to make it sound Western in order to be able to make instruments and sell in the violin field, because if you have an Asian name on there, people don't want that. People don't want instrument from China. People don't want instrument from Korea. It's got to be European. It's a very specific thing that we have to deal with. Where was I going to go with this? Yeah, it's that, and constantly being told that we don't belong in this space because of our heritage, because of what we look like, what we speak like. Funny enough, but it's not really like, it's not that we don't belong here. It's just that we are being constantly told that we don't belong here. So I think that like that, I just want to address that, because it's something that I'm seeing. I think for me, the community, like Amanda was saying, talking to other people who look like me, who are interested in this, who are in this field, talking to each other and connecting with each other has been really, really important, because I'm just kind of trying to count off my hand. There's possibly like maybe 10-ish people that I know from worldwide that we are talking to each other about, like, well, I thought I was the only one in this continent. So I think, connecting with each other and talking about it has been really helpful, and I think it will move us forward.
I just want to add to that and say, like, thank you so much to everyone that like tells their story. And I hope by like this whole conversation that you realize like how important it is, like and this goes to like everybody that's watching us, like to all the panelists, like even if you think your story is small or uninteresting or unimportant, telling your story, constantly hearing these narratives, like Amanda, who has told her story over and over again, that is what changes reality. Like hearing these narratives, hearing these stories, words and stories create our realities and create our worlds. And I think that's how we're gonna like achieve change in all of this. Even as simple as it seems to like tell your story, it's really, really important.
I would love to just speak on that, since the majority of my project is sharing other folks' stories, and just to second what Maria said and just really encourage folks. No one can share your story like you can, and that makes you uniquely different. And just to reiterate that the sharing of stories, the repetition of it, that's how we identify things as humans. We want to give names and symbols and representation. And I found, especially with how I've approached interviewing and allowing people to share their stories, there's also a big barrier around people feeling welcome enough and comfortable enough to do that. There's definitely a difference between seeing yourself in a space and feeling truly comfortable in a space. And so putting emphasis on that, I think also will encourage people to open up. It's scary. It's very scary to be vulnerable. It's scary to be a creative person, because you're sharing a part of yourself that, you know, the rest of the world doesn't necessarily express themselves that way. And it can be really challenging and really scary. But there are people in this community, the greater craft community, music, that want to hear your story. That I encourage, you know, folks that are new to the woodworking fields, like you have just as much to offer as a 30-year veteran. Your fresh perspective, you're reinvigorating, you know, the creative process for so many people with your enthusiasm and the new designs and ideas you come up with. Every contribution is just so important. And I really am grateful for this community for emphasizing the importance of stories and just how valuable that is, because that is one thing we all have and we can all share, and is truly what makes us different and unique. And yes, making people feel comfortable, welcomed, and just the validation, I feel like goes so much further than we realize.
Yeah, thank you so much for highlighting all these individual stories, Katie. It's so empowering. When I found out about Women of Woodworking, I was like, it just felt very validated, right? and also that you've interviewed a lot of women in Lutheran community members too. And I think traditionally, I feel that the Lutheran field has been it has been somewhat excluded from the woodworking community, because we work so specifically with musicians, and that's why, like, I think this panel happening in Women in Lutheran space means a lot to me personally, because there is so much crossover between musicians, music field, and the craft field, and where Luthery field exists, in that we all are kind of, all crossing over, and then that's where the whole like intersectionality comes in, where, yeah, so yeah.
Wow, that was wonderful around stories. I want to continue with the previous second part of the question, but also to just point out roots, right? So I still have a long view. And so between imperialism, white supremacy, patriarchy, they all utilize symbols that we and other artist people make, right, in service of one agenda, one preferred norm, preferred identity, and such. And so, the stories of women, the stories of people of culture, indigenous people have been erased, right? Both our roots and the current and ongoing stories and truth of our creativity and our contribution. And so sharing our stories now for, the purpose of restoring our rightful place in a healthy, dynamic society, this is our quote unquote weapon. This is our tool, right? Added to the tools that Jimin has behind her, in the top shelf of the power of the story. Exactly. So, yeah, I love that. And so, there are two things that I want to lead to. So again, that question about alternative ways of sharing the knowledge that we have, whether it's in training someone who's already volunteering to be able to do higher capacity work that can lead to growth and payment, since we are starting from scratch. Example, my mentor in ceramics, he is one of the few that, as initially a solopreneur, has made it to like the multi-million-dollar mark and 20 plus employees. And I haven't asked specifically if he had additional support, but I know that when he got his first commission at the MoMA, that chunk of money he didn't put into like rent, He continued to scrimp as if it hadn't arrived, and then bought another wheel and someone to fill in. And so he immediately thought to expansion, and that increased capacity. Enter today, he's now a beacon in the field. And so, that creative thinking, like, rather than let me keep pushing and do it this way, what's an alternate way? Versus all the ceramicists I tend to encounter are doing shop updates, and they're broke after 17 minutes when their shop sells out, and now you have 3 months till you can sell again. So alternate ways of sharing our knowledge, of approaching growth. And then next, I'd like to ask some questions about accountability for those that do other us, that make us feel excluded. Like, at what point and how can we, with the power of our story, hold people accountable without necessarily being subject to further othering, dismissal, or isolation, exclusion from the field?
I guess I'll start on the first question. Oh, I'm so excited. Like, Shawndel, you're just like hitting all the things we want to talk about and get really juicy about this conversation. Yes. That's Shawndel's word. So when I told her, yeah, I'm carving out 2 hours for this, and first thing Shawndel says was juicy. I think I really loved hearing about that story of your mentor and the money come in and putting into expansion and getting another person into that space. Oh my gosh, I'm thinking about this a lot, and this is a personal thing, not necessarily like the equity work I'm doing with women in Luthery, but I feel like it does kind of connect, because personally I moved into this space couple months ago, it had basically been, I'd been working from home before, and then at kind of subletting another person's workshop for a long time. And then I finally, during the pandemic with the commercial real estate going down, I was able to grab this space. And it came together because I really wanted to start a space where I can have my own values and be able to like be in control of my own values, and a bigger space where I can share with other people, specifically women of color. Would be like, this is like what I want to do, is train people, share people, invite people to show me stuff, and invite people that I can show stuff. I've been incredibly lucky in a way in my field that I do feel that I have enough on my belt, on the resume, that I've been, you know, reaching somewhat of a, you know, it's very, well, it's very arbitrary, but success, I suppose. I don't feel that way, but that's what people tell me. And so wanting to create the space to bring other people in, and especially the, you know, people from the women in literary community. I already have 2-3 people coming in the next 3 months, who's going to be, you know, just joining me for like a week or 2, just get experience, and you know, get, hopefully eventually that will grow. I specifically designed this workshop space to have at least 2 more people in here, so that I can have, hopefully hire somebody to work with me, or perhaps like a cooperatively, and then also have an empty bench where people can keep coming to visit. Is like, that's what I'm really, really hoping to, you know, grow here. So that's definitely on the forefront of my mind, even though I haven't actually done it yet.
That's a great model. I've been to Jimin's studio. It's so beautiful. There's like light colored walls and light wood. And I can imagine a group of luthiers and, you know, ancillarily connected people crowding around, seeing a technique, talking about a tool, or even just a discussion about what have you, you know, what is that common experience?
Yeah.
Like that couch that you're on and the other great chairs that you have, right? It's like informal environments, especially grouped around the things that are so important to us. It doesn't take much. It really doesn't take much in all the groups that I've had. That level of comfort and welcoming someone does allow the space for the sharing of one story, and then, you know, more vested, more investment rather into whatever cause might be brought up, you know, on the tail end of it.
Sorry. Sorry, I was showing off my yellow pants. But yes, totally. Like, yeah, I think Shawndel, you and I talked about this because you're also creating that ceramic space in Bronx, where you want it to be the hub of the community, where people can come in and learn and see, and also do these workshops. And I definitely want to try to do that in my space. Where, like, I mean, like Anne, please, if you're ever in New York City, I would love to have you over. I want to, it could be like maybe like a girls rock on fiddle camp, you know? So yeah, I think just like, and then it kind of goes, I guess, back to early conversation about creating new pathways on how we go about this. Is I want to try to do more community workshops and gatherings and whatnot at my space, and not just be a typical conservative traditional violin shop where you go in and it's like, you know, moldings everywhere, big thick carpet and you know, mahogany furniture, and like somebody in a suit comes over and be like, well, do you have $1 million to buy a really nice instrument from me? Or yeah.
Does anyone else have any thoughts that are percolating around alternative models? If not, we can move on to the next question, and that's okay.
Well, one thought I had was just about, I feel like we've all talked a little bit about like what we're good at. Maria was talking about like, being good at talking to people and community building. And I think we've all sort of touched upon this idea of like what our skills are, what our, and somebody said something about like what brings you joy in this work. And when I think about expanding, or I think about like the idea of like taking money you got from a job and putting it into hiring employees and this sort of thing, it starts making me think about the like perennial sort of problem, I don't know, this perennial situation that artists and scientists and just like experts in anything get into, where they got into a field because they love this thing, and then when they get good at it, they become managers of people doing the thing that they love. So I think that another thing that's been said a bunch is like, oh, tradition, or there are like men in the field that have these women that support them, whether it's a wife or just a secretary or somebody that works for them. So they're like the artist and somebody else is doing the administrative work. And I think there's something in all of that mix that's where we can sort of, without giving into like just following patriarchal models, we can learn from this information and say like, okay, well, this is what I'm good at, this is what I love, this is what brings me joy, and I need to find somebody who's good at that other thing to help me grow this. I don't have any specific ideas on that, but I just wanted to add that comment.
Can I offer another example? So there's another mentor here in the Bronx, and he loves throwing. So he only throws. So he's only on the wheel. But he hired a wonderful Virgo to manage production, and he has someone who's really good at pulling handles and someone else who's really good at packing. So he's still in the mud, and hired other people who have the skills and the patience for those other pieces to do that. And he's chosen to remain small. He could be as big as my other mentor, but he can't throw 5,000 pieces a day or whatever my other guy is doing. And he's happy with that. He's like, this is what my body can do. This is what the days allow. I frame my days, so thinking about Katie and her approach to what is manageable for me without making oneself, a widget in your own factory, And so, yeah, he keeps it sustainable for himself in that way. I do think there are challenges, because if he's sick, then nothing is being thrown. And so that becomes kind of like the burnout situation with the equity work everyone was talking about, right? Like if you are the one carrying the weight of the work and the knowledge is only in you, then that's where redundancy is a good thing. Like you still need someone else to be able to step in. So like my prior mentor broke his arm this summer in 3 places and had to get a steel plate, but because he had a team of ceramicists, he could heal and business didn't stop. So what is that fine line, right? Like it's true, we talked about that and I believe it. Just because you're good at social media doesn't mean you should be the manager of the social media person, because maybe your communication stinks and you hate confrontation and you don't like writing performance reviews, right? That's a completely different skill set from telling the story and engagement with your audience and picking the right images and things like that. So yeah, it's true. Staying within your wheelhouse of what feels good and what you can do well, I think is definitely a more feminine approach to doing something than relentless expansion, conquering a field, getting all the money, for sure. So thank you. I framed the question in terms of what is a divine feminine way of doing what we do and getting the word out there and knocking down the boundaries between equity work and the larger community so that we proliferate into the larger community and this becomes norm, right? That acceptance, inclusion, welcoming becomes standard rather than othering and diminishing and starting people out at a deficit in your perception of what they can do, even if they have the skills as somebody else applying. Very nice.
I love that the part that I learned in the last few years from the ecofeminists and their work is that I used to didn't, and I think this is something that can't be said enough that the sustainability work and feminism work, it's the same thing. And I didn't know this until somebody told me, another scholar who's an ecofeminist told me about this. And because the culture that we have been growing up on is the culture of colonizing not just other cultures, but also in other people's bodies, but also other the colonizing the space, the earth that we live in, and using whatever, taking resources that isn't your own to your advantage. That's the definition of colonizing. And that the feminism movement is basically about trying to fight the colonization of our bodies and our autonomy and lives. And it's the same thing with the earth and the countries. And so when somebody put that into together, credit to M. Pero, if you're listening, sustainability expert based in Seattle, I think that's when it started really clicking on me, like, oh, that's why everything is like, it's all connected, and all the work that we're doing it all sounds so similar because we're all trying to fight the colonization. So yeah, carry on.
Before we carry on, I just wanted to let you guys know we have 15 minutes left. Please carry on.
Is that 15 minutes until Q&A or inclusive of the remaining time for Q&A?
Inclusive of the remaining time of Q&A, but I believe that you have addressed Flora's question and one of the previous questions that were addressed by the panel. So everyone else, please continue to add any questions that you might have, and I will let you know when we receive more.
So just a quick improv while we see if anyone has any questions. Jimin, thank you for talking about ecofeminism. So I just want to point out, right, like for those people who eat meat, and even if we eat fruits, right, most of the things that we eat are female. Most of the things we eat are female. And so production is seen as a resource at zero value and is priced for profit. So we are working in a system that sees the things that we do, whether it's for the greater good, or we're just a cog in the machine working traditional jobs that really just drain you and don't really replenish for the labor that you do. We are seen as needing to be perpetually productive, right? Black women who were brought here, kidnapped here and brought here, were forced to reproduce. And so they were a minimal investment, maximum output for however many she could bear. And those children continue to produce like a fruit tree. So, when I talked about earlier that, equity work is social work, social workers are essentially the mothers that do the labor unseen behind patriarchy's domination of the story and the rewards and the comfort. This is part of where that's coming from, is that intersection between feminism and thinking about us as fruits on the vine in this system.
Shawndel, could you expand a little bit? I mean, like, I'm wrapping my head around it, about the fact that everything that we eat is female. Like, I was thinking, like, right now that you said it, and I was like, well, yeah, like, we eat cows, we don't eat bulls. We eat, like, chicken, like hens, we don't eat roosters.
Exactly.
Like, I had never thought about that. Like, it's literally blowing my mind right now.
Exactly.
So I don't know if
regardless
you could
of gender, real would be
on
children.
That would be awesome.
I mean, you got it. Those are the two prime examples. Even when we have, roe that's coming from a female fish of some kind, and so, women, females, things that produce organically from the body are seen as endless resources. Like, you plant an apple tree in the orchard, and when that tree dies, it's not producing, it becomes firewood, like there's no further value for it, rather than it still being a part of an ecosystem and needing to hold soil together and bring water to the surface. Like, there are more purposes than profit. And so that colonized mindset about what a thing is, the valuation of things versus intrinsic value of people, of other life, that we separate other life into these terms that are connotated in the languages of the imperial, right? I speak Spanish, French, Portuguese, like it's all the same with how we separate our life from the life of other things, but our lives are inextricably connected. But we have to devalue the other in order to get the profit, right? And anytime there's abuse of an other, right? The diminishment of Jewish people in order to liken them to animals for the Holocaust, or, you know, brown people from Persia are seen as, you know, the potential terrorists in order to validate bombing them. Like there's always a dehumanization that happens whenever there's another agenda at play, and we want to do it without guilt and without waking up the population to the true injustice.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. My pulpit on a Sunday. So
Minds
are
are
there any
being blown.
questions? What was that?
Minds are being blown.
Then my job here is done. So, okay, then let's go into that quick question, because a couple of you did share some stories, specific stories of people who both othered you and diminished your effort in comparison to, say, male counterparts who did the exact same thing, people who may or may not be active in your fields today, right? We have the Me Too movement, which was very much damaged by that Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial. That was a mess for me. And it's just like, I recognize as a survivor of sexual abuse and a family that's full of bullies and perpetrators, how hard it is to speak up and not be exiled or castigated, or there's a retaliation. And so we talked about power of numbers earlier, like the numbers of us if we band together, and the solidarity and comfort that we feel hearing each other's stories, seeing our faces reflected. You know, is there a way, or maybe the time is not yet and we work to it, but is there a way to be able to stand firm and hold accountable the institutions and that support these people, as well as those people for the damage that they do? Or is it simply hold your peace, turn the other cheek, and go do the equity work? And it's not that it's a less than, but at what point does it stop? And Hillary's work definitely goes toward that. So one of the things that occurred to me in talking to Hillary, who I talked to first, which was really great how it all unfolded, is like just how we get healthcare in America through our employers. Somehow, even though they hire us for 8 hours a day, if you're lucky, that they are responsible for you having access to resources to care for your life every day, all day. Somehow doing DEI work in organizations now means that the shift from deeply held maladaptive ideas is crucial for you to maintain your job. Like, you can't be a racist jerk and keep this job selling guitars. You got to respond to everybody with equal respect and timing and information and welcoming. And so, yeah, I wonder, like, based on the spaces that you all inhabit as musicians on the front line, and predominantly male and all white people, where the history of the music may even be eclipsed from who participated in it, to being in these wood shops or going to the lumber yards, like what are the current opportunities to stop it where it lives, you know, without the particular skills that, say, Hillary has? Like, how can we do that? How can we stop it? How can we stop the misogyny, the sexual comments, all of that?
Who wants to start? I'll start because I'd like talking. I think there's, I don't think equity work has like one answer. I think it's like a 1,000-prong approach that slowly, hope maybe not in our lifetime, I don't know, slowly shifts the culture to hopefully, I mean, like we think about how globally, I know a lot of us here are US based here, but we also have a global representation in terms of, like, you know, like I'm originally from Korea, and you know, I think people listening in also, I think globally there is a different idea of like how far we have come versus like, oh, we look at the things that are happening in the politics, and we're all going backwards, and things are falling apart. Yes, it's true. Things are looking bad in certain areas, but also when we look at globally, compared to 100 years ago, we have come really far. And I think I tend to be one of those people who are like, yes, like it's, the progress is not a straight line, and it goes up and down and up and down, but eventually, slowly, it is moving towards progress. It could be just that I'm a hopeless romantic. I don't know, but I like to believe that that's true. And, like me personally, I have a quadruple whammy, I tell people, of like being like the Asian, queer, feminine looking, also young looking women, even though I'm 40, everyone thinks I'm like in my 20s. So I'm every spaces that I go, especially in Western spaces. The culture is very different in Asia. Nobody thinks I'm in my 20s in Asia, but in the spaces that I walk in Western spaces, I have this quadruple whammy of being seen as like very powerless, small, doesn't know anything, must be young, inexperienced, this, that, like, and that's been my experience. And when I started talking to other women all over the world, just last month I was in Italy, in Cremona, talking to women who I thought was like, who I think is like really empowered, have their own name as maestras in their own workshop, doing these, making these instruments. And they told me how people walk in their workshop and tell them, where's the maestro? Who should I talk to? And they're like, do you see the name on the, like, that's my name, like, that's me, like, and people still thinking, but where's the maestro? Like, where's your husband? Or where's like or where's your maestro? So I think it's a very much constant string of experiences that people have. What I was gonna get to was that because we feel this, when I'm walking in the space where people are asking me to represent the women or represent the Asian folks or the POC or WOC, I used to say yes to everything because I want to make a difference for other folks who look like me or who feel marginalized. And I've done a lot of work in the nonprofit and private sectors, basically the DEI work, diversity, equity, inclusion work. And I have chaired certain the DEI committees. I have been doing those things, which actually over time burnt me out. And I felt extremely tokenized, that like, oh, there is a young looking Asian woman there, like who talks about who's being loud. So let's put her in this leadership position. And then like, we feel really good about this because we put a, young women of color in the position of power. But then when I'm put in this position, because the culture itself and the infrastructure is not there to support me and my work, I can't do anything. And it's a constant struggle to try to make people understand why I need to do certain things, and then trying to get people to mobilize. Over time, it created so much difficulty and drama, and I started getting bullied by other white male board members who thought that, oh, Jimin's not getting work done. And I've been pushed out, I've been kicked out. I also left on my own volition because F this, why am I doing free work for these people to make them look good? So that's why I'm not really part of any professional organizations or associations in my field. Even though individuals I have met have been, lovely, the culture itself is very unsafe space for me to do that work. And that's why I put my time and free labor into women in Lutherie, because that's where I feel it's the community of women who feel like me, understand me, and we are working together to make those changes. Whereas I feel like in my industry, in the violin field anyways, it's still unsafe to be able to do that work in the open.
I just wanted to add on to that and say, it definitely has to be cultural change. I think we all wish there was one magic button that we could press and be like, all right, bye bigots, the world just doesn't work that way. But it also emphasizes the importance of small acts and how setting the tone in your own shops, your own standards for yourself really does make a difference. I think I was talking with Aspen Golden about her experience. I think she was at Penland at the time, and just from the get-go, instructors saying this is this kind of space, this kind of behavior won't be tolerated, and having a zero tolerance policy, because even if whatever incident happens, the people on the outside are seeing, okay, this person was protected and taken care of regardless of this. This is unacceptable. And it does spread. It is a cultural mindset that starts to change. And I recognize how easy it is for a white cis woman like me to be able to sit here and say, no, that's not acceptable, because that is also a privilege in itself to be able to even just speak up in that type of way. But I do fully believe that, every small act, those do all add up to a larger cultural shift. So even if something doesn't feel like, oh, I shouldn't harp on that, or I should let this go. No, it does make a difference. If it's not even just for your personal self, your own validation, it is helping the greater cultural shift that needs to happen.
So then for me, that begs the question, how do we get to the point, and what is it? What is the mechanism to getting to the point where there is more support for those who come forward so that they don't feel the effects of disenfranchisement and exclusion? Is it about all of your organizations banding together and creating a network of opportunities within yourself? Totally imagining here, but I guess I'm asking for us to put our creative caps on and say, and what could those mechanics be, and then reverse engineer it over time. And this field, craft, Lutherie, woodworking, being a musician, all of these are parts of society, right? These are all, how do I call it, we are trying to capsule, contained within, right? A big gel capsule of society. And so as a microcosm, what we do both ripples out, and it's a laboratory for how it can happen in the other spaces that we inhabit, and those who hear about it or witness it can perpetuate it as well. So in our laboratory, what is viable? Someone in the comments is saying, Erica, the elephant in the room is our cultural moment where our politicians and I guess public figures tolerate and encourage bullying, misogyny, etc., and how this trickles down in so many ways. So yeah, that's where I come back to informal networks, our smaller organizations, our relationships, meaningful relationships in the way that femmes are free to do, because we have access to our emotions, both culturally and because we've been socialized to be able to do that. These are our resistances is our fully being present with one another and utilizing what privileges we do have, depending on the positions that we hold in order to support. And that makes me think of when I was moving back from Texas to New York, I asked a friend of mine to use her white privilege and escort me in case I was pulled over, because all I could see was her sister who was pulled over for a red light, and then they killed her the next day. And so my friend, understanding her role, was like, absolutely, I can do that. And thankfully we didn't need to do it, but she was willing to utilize her privilege because she fully understood the chances of her being harmed were very, very little, right? Aside from someone who's seeking women, and that her ability to stand up, and she has the language to be able to stand up and advocate for me, because I am an imposing tall Black woman, you know, who can be mistaken from a man from the back, you know? And so it doesn't take much to mistake me as a threat if your mind is already set that way. So I think people being really rooted in who they are, like being honest with ourselves, what positions do we hold, and how can we fill the spaces that need to be filled and be able to lock arms and provide a safety network for one another. I guess maybe that's the thought to leave with as we go back into our world outside of this bubble we've created, and thinking about how can we show up and start to create that resiliency that those who are courageous enough and well-positioned enough to speak up so that they can fall back into. In the dance community, there was something I always wanted to happen, and that is to have almost like a classifieds of all the work that we do, because the nature of dance, as I've experienced it with partner dance in particular, is that we get very close because we touch, and we get physical touch, friend enjoyment, oxytocin with each other. There's a willingness to support each other through so many different things. And, you know, there are people who do not get that support for various reasons. We are a human society, right? And so there are people who get excluded. But what I've witnessed is, you know, a lot of support, and even those who don't get supported, where I've supported to, like, I see you, I hear you, how can I help you? That means something. But having a listing of like all these dancers, we have lawyers, we have judges, we have all these interesting positions, plus they are people who are grounded and want to be connected. Maybe there's a way of identifying all the things that we bring to the table, not just the equity work piece, but all that informs it and informs us, that might let us feel more secure and just how powerful we are if we know more of the fullness of what we bring to the table.
That is beautiful. And I think what I started realizing also in Women in New Theory community is that using our own, like each of our own connections and privilege and power to help each other and to help support each other. And that's the whole meaning of the community, right? And I think after this panel, that's I think we're going to be connecting with each other more, and you know, talk about, and hopefully, and, you know, anybody who's listening, please feel free to reach out to any of us or any of the communities. And I think creating these connections and kind of tying back to what I was saying earlier about like finding your own joy and creating that joy with creating the community of shared joy and slowly expanding that shared joy, I think is a big way where it trickling up, you know, bottom up, the grassroots, you know, community way of creating that joy ourselves, rather than waiting for something to trickle down from up there, because it doesn't always trickle down. Often it doesn't.
We learned with Reagan, it does not trickle down. I mean, trickles down is like R. Kelly style. We don't want it. We don't want it.
And I just want to butt in. I know we're running a little late before we wrap up. I want to thank everyone for being here. And I want to thank Pamela Leisure for helping me put this together. Shawndel also for putting this together. And it's been personally and professionally and socially super fulfilling for me to hear from all of you.
I agree. Is there anyone else on the panel or any last questions? We were given a tiny bit of leeway to go over as we've gone over a few minutes. So any last thoughts? In the meantime, I'll just say I appreciate all of the panelists spending time with me, sharing, just being your vibrant, amazing selves. You all have activated within me the thing that I had been reluctant to bring forward. And so, Jimin, I'm also thankful to you for this opportunity to speak with all of these people. Has been such a treat. It's been a busy couple of weeks, you know, but it also showed me what I'm capable of as a person also living with disability. So thank you so much for, you know, being in the synchronistic flow and allowing me what I needed to see myself much more clearly. Yeah. I heart you.
Thank you, everyone. Everyone, please join me in thanking our panel and our moderator. To our moderator, Shawndel, thank you for your dexterity in directing this discussion and for regularly bringing everyone, including the audience, to an excellent summary of what was being talked about. Thank you very much. This is an excellent skill. To our panelists, thank you for your contribution, for sharing your experience, your thoughts, and your ideas, but most importantly, thank you for the work that you do and for making your mark. This discussion is live, so you are empowering others and not just in the woodworking and lutherie fields. So thank you very much. I'm hearting you all too.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you must be very exhausted.
It felt
please
so short.
I bet it does.
Let's talk more.
I'm sure everybody would love to do that. But for now, please feel free to have a short break. And we will come back at 55 minutes past the hour or 5 minutes before the hour. That's in 10 minutes time for an excellent session. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.